I wanted to introduce Nicolette Mariano, CEO and aquaculture biologist for her oyster farm, Treasure Coast Shellfish, the only oyster farm in the growing area of Sebastian, Florida. They're proud to be part of the next generation of sustainable aquaculture farmers on the east coast of the Sunshine State. Welcome, Nicolette.
Hey, thanks, Aggie. Thank you for having me.
It's so good to have you here. I mean, this is such a neat career path that you've chosen. And I appreciate, I know we were talking about schedules and, being up at 4 a.m. I mean, so I really appreciate your time. And
Yeah,
sharing
of
this.
course.
We're getting what a day in life is like already, but let's jump into it a bit more. So you not only run the shellfish farm, which is very exciting and interesting and involves a lot, I'm sure, but also handle logistics, social media, outreach. I know you actually give seminars and sessions. That's how I heard of you. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
A lot of good educational stuff. So tell us what a typical day is like for you.
Oh gosh, it's always changing. It's always changing. So we'll have our harvest days and delivery days and pickup days and also we haven't gotten seed yet this year, but it all
Oh,
depends.
that's
So
the
then we got to
cutest
take
little
care of
oysters
the
you've ever
oysters.
seen.
Yeah. So it's farming. So you're working in around, Mother Nature. So yeah, you know,
Is
days
it
like a
mostly early
typical.
mornings or it changes? Like it depends.
It'll change. So this time of year, we're in what's called the summer months or the warmer months or Vibrio months. Since we're the farm and we're also the certified processor, shellfish processor with Department of Ag. I'm gonna look at my chart because I always forget. May to September. Um, you can no longer do traditional cooling, which traditional cooling is you can harvest anytime from to sunrise to 5 p.m. and then oysters have to get into the cooler and then have to be at 55 or below. I think it's 8 hours. We never do traditional cooling even outside those months. We always do rapid cooling. Um, so rapid cooling is you oysters have to once they're received have to get to 55 or below within 2 hours. So from May to September, we can only do rapid cooling. So we have from sunrise until prior to 11 a.m. to harvest and to get the oysters in the cooler and down to temperature, which is 55 or below within 2 hours. So those are those 4 a.m. days waking up and harvesting and going out, pulling, counting, checking the oysters, clacking them, making sure they're not hollow or dead, or if they're leaking. If the oysters, we get scrapes and bruises. The oysters sometimes do a little bit too. When they're handled, their growth edge. Let's see. This isn't a good example, but their growth edge. It's also called the feather edge. You can kind of maybe see it's a little lighter. This one's pretty thick. But if that gets chipped too much with handling, the oysters will leak. So we don't want them to leak and be packed up for sale. Those will go back out to the farm and will grow more shell. So that's actually to get a nice deep cup oyster. That's what we're continuously working. You want to chip that growth edge to get a nice deep cup oyster for the half shell market.
I'll tell you, it was awesome
Um,
half shell ones we had. You did a really good job.
yeah.
You're doing such a well. You grew up with this, Nicolette. You grew up in Stuart, Florida, not too far from the Indian River
Yep.
Lagoon estuary, right? But unfortunately, over the years,
Yeah.
according to reading your bio, I was checking out, you saw the drastic decline of this really beautiful waterway. So, how did you make it your career to, focus on this and educate and try to restore the estuary? And are you seeing a change with the work you're doing?
Yes, yes and no. It depends on the years. But also it was during COVID when I started out here. But yeah, so the Indian River Lagoon encompasses 1/3 of the entire east coast of Florida. And yeah, and is the most biodiverse estuary in North America. So and it's an estuary, so it's essentially like the pupping ground of the nursery from everything from fish to sharks, like bull sharks, pupping their babies, dolphins, stone crabs, lobsters, things like that. So the decline and the loss of the seagrass, which is where all the juvenile organisms, not all of them, most of them will hide and use as shelter. There isn't that structure for them to live and hide and eat. It's been amazing to see the farm. I mean, the farm, we're the first floating water column or floating farm in our area. So I mean, it was all bottom leases, and bottom leases you use 6 inches off the bottom, primarily for planting clams.
Hmm.
So I say it was like, oh, it's like the desert with a tumbleweed going by. It's like, oh, there's sand and a gray starfish and a mullet swam by, and now every year there's different species recruiting, seeing the babies uh, use the cages and the bags inside the cages as that vertical three-dimensional habitat for them to hide. Because our bags are different sizes depending on the size of the oyster. So our smallest size bag is 4 millimeter, all the way up to 18 millimeter. So four is kind of maybe the size of a pinhead. And then 18's about, well, kind of my thumb fitting there. So depending on the size, when the little critters get in there, and crabs, it's cool to see the crabs, but they're also predators. So they'll get into a bag of seed and just eat them like little corn chips. So,
Oh no,
and
right.
then,
So you have all that. Yeah, you're really in nature.
yep, yeah. So that's been amazing to see. I mean, I've never seen a live bay scallop in the Indian River Lagoon in my entire life until a couple of years ago.
Oh
So they
wow.
were setting on our cages on the farm. We were just getting off a rack and bag. So bottom method, 2 water column when we got approval. They were setting in the cages and the bags, and also at our dock nursery setup. So that was awesome. And there's like so many of them. And then what was it? Last summer, I've never seen so many seahorses out there
Oh,
on the farm.
wow.
So yeah, to me at first, seeing them like wrap their tail, like the small ones and some larger ones, but like wrapping their tail around the cages are like 5/8 inch rope. And I'm like, this is sad. They should be hanging on to seagrass. And
Mm.
then I think it was the next day, or I woke up in the middle of the night and I was thinking, even if there was a luscious forest of seagrass underneath the cages, the oyster cages, I think the seahorses might still be on the cages because there's amphipods, skeleton shrimps, these other organisms that they're feeding on.
Mm.
So it's like, it's sad because there isn't seagrass, but even if there was, maybe they'd still be in our cages, not in the cages, around the cages, because there's the food source for them.
So neat. It's like you're creating your own ecosystem, like to help the
Yes.
whole
Oh,
ecosystem,
definitely.
right?
Yeah. And I mean,
And that's how it was
even,
naturally. I mean, it used to be, right? It used to have all of these growing native, right, naturally, and so you're kind of bringing that back. So that's what you say your goal is, right? At Treasure Coast Shellfish, to bring back a dying shellfish industry on the east coast of Florida, and then being on the forefront of these sustainable aquaculture practices. I mean, it's exactly the kind of careers people dream of because they want to have an impact, they want to help, and they also want to create beautiful food. So tell us what you love about your job, Nicolette, and what's challenging about it.
yeah. Oh gosh, everything's kind of challenging. I mean, your Mother Nature is our biggest business partner. There's no negotiating with her. So,
She kind of calls the shots,
um,
huh?
yeah, yeah, there's no talking to her on that one. So, I mean, we've gone from everything from drought to too much rain to hurricanes, not enough food in the water for the oysters to feed on. So, I think it was our 2022 crop, 6 mil, about pinky size. Um, we didn't get rain until Hurricane Ian. So the Indian River was clear in our area. And during the summer, the river really shouldn't be clear. During the winter, it is a little bit, but clear doesn't necessarily mean healthy. Especially for an estuary, you want those good algae blooms. I mean, sponges, different animals. oysters, clams, mussels, they're filtering algae, and algae is a plant, so it photosynthesizes and uses the sun just like your grass or tree. So it needs different sometimes influx of fresh water and nutrients is for them to kind of ignite a good, good algae bloom. So that was the year we got seed early. We got to plant our crop and got seed when we wanted for once. And then it didn't grow until more than halfway through the year until Hurricane Ian. So it was one extreme to the next. And then with Hurricane Nicole, we had lines break. We had a pole go through our lease. The private aquaculture dock that we're off of, a sailboat broke loose, and we were in the water physically pulling the sailboat off of the dock.
Mm.
Because if it kept hitting the dock, it would have went through the dock. And on the other side is our nursery. So that would not have been good for us. All of the seed either was out on the farm or we took it out of the water on the upper part of the dock and secured it because that gear isn't robust enough to handle that kind of battering of waves. Um, yeah, so
That's both. I mean, this is a brain job and a hands-on job. You're using both.
yep. Yes, and then logistics and talking to customers, talking just to the general public and doing ordering and managing the crew and looking like, because it's farming, but it's in the water. It's like if you plant corn, you might not, you can't plant corn throughout the entire year. So what's your other crop? What's your off crop? Um, we're focused on oysters right now. We were working with hard clams, but Ian and after Nicole, we didn't replant. We lost our entire crop.
Oh,
So
wow. Yeah, so the same challenges that any other farm would have.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
But still.
interesting. People were like, "Oh, what do you mean?" Uh, like, did you not notice like your vegetables or even your tomatoes weren't as flavorful and the fruit? I mean, with last summer, excessive heat throughout the South. I mean, cattle were having heat stroke.
Hmm.
So, I mean, it was a very tough year for ag in general. I mean, in the South and even up north. I mean, what was that? A storm that ended up even going up into Canada and Maine that, you know,
Yeah, the
they're
stuff you
not
have to work with.
prepared for hurricanes up that way.
Yeah, no, I know. It's
Yeah.
really true. Do you love it though?
Yeah.
Do you still love it even with the challenges? Is it worth it?
Yeah. It's that I'll be honest, it's that roller coaster. Because the company's growing and it's that not doing more of the administrative stuff now than being on the farm and that struggle while still trying to manage the farm and the crew. And then asking for photos because I'm not out there and what's going on. And, then a customer will send you a photo and be like, hey, this is what we got. Was it the right thing? And, when I started this company by myself. And it's like, I knew exactly everything because I touched and did everything. It's like, let me go talk to somebody else. I wasn't there, or I physically didn't do that. So it's the growing pains and letting go. It's just like, you got a new car or something, and then someone wants to borrow it, even if it's like your kid or your parent, and you're still like, that's my
Right?
new baby.
Yeah, take care of it.
So yeah, so what was just doing different things, kind of, getting away from the monotonous of the administrative stuff and even the farm really helps ignite me every once in a while, and I need that. So last night, there was a farm to table event at Driftwood down in Boynton Beach, and Jimmy Everett and Tommy over there. And Driftwood's a restaurant that actually was one of my first few restaurants when I started in the beginning. And I've never actually eaten there. Fast forward 4 years. So it was focused on farm to table, and 40% of the people that came for that dinner were actual farmers. And it was awesome to see. A lot of them were women. Like most of them were women. So
Nice.
yeah, so that's you don't get to see it from the other end that often, and that dinner was focused really like for the farmers, which was amazing. Um, I think getting to talk to other people and people coming up to you and like, especially, a lot of people have that stigma on not eating a Florida oyster or a Southern oyster. There's a good handful of people that came up to me last night at that dinner and was like, Jimmy or Tommy like had to convince me the first time, to try your oysters. And they really like them,
They're
I mean,
fantastic.
it goes,
We love them.
the-
We're gonna drive by. We drive up north for the summer, and we are gonna stop in. I'm telling you right now, you'll see me in person. They were so good.
yeah, you gotta let
Yeah.
me know ahead of time. We only harvest the order, so
Okay, gotcha. I will let you know ahead of time. Good to know. Good to
yeah.
Great. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. So just talking to other people or even, like you reaching out and getting out and talking to people about it. They're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. Wait, it takes like that's how small a baby oyster is, and it's like this big now. It's like,
I'll put a
yeah,
link to your page that has that. They're on there. They're on your website, right? At the bottom, I feel like I scrolled and I saw the photos. I'll include that for
yeah,
people so
yeah.
they
And
can.
there's videos on the bottom too. It's the Ray of Film episode, the episode 10. A 15-minute film. So that does a good overview of everything.
Yeah, I'll
Even
definitely include
to the
that for
restaurant.
sure. Well, so let me ask you
Yeah.
just one or two more questions. In that, what would you recommend to somebody who did want to follow in your footsteps? Now, you say you've been around the other farmers now, you're seeing it's not just a guy's thing, women are there too. What would you recommend to somebody who maybe wanted to do what you're doing or something similar?
Yeah, definitely do your research and work on other farms first. I mean, I have my bachelor's in aquaculture. I went to Florida Tech in Melbourne, but everything I've learned that I'm using for my business now, I learned within my first few jobs out of college. Working my first job was up in Massachusetts on Cape Cod, working for the town of Barnstable. So that wasn't a lot. That was more like stock enhancement and regulation. So even though it's another state and being a farmer now, where my first job, we were regulating farmers and aquaculture, shellfish aquaculture, recreational shellfish, and commercial. Um, it gives me another like view of like sometimes it's like these regulations are silly, if you will. Some of them are, they do need to be looked at, collect new data, not papers from the 40s or the 60s. Things change. We have seatbelts in cars now. Just like, it's safe to eat oysters year round. It's not the ice box days. We have proper refrigeration and time and temperature. Um,
That was a lesson
uh,
learned. I heard from my husband got to see you at an event, and that's what we were like, oh, okay, now we understand that better. Okay, yeah, so you're right, things have changed. So some of these
yeah.
regulations could be looked at. Okay.
Yeah. So, it's like they were set in place at a certain time, which might have made sense then, but a lot of things that sometimes hinder the industry, of course, from, a farmer standpoint, like this is silly, but it just depends on what it is. So for example, we are reliant, or Treasure Coast Shellfish is reliant on hatcheries to get seed. So Florida does not, so there's, we will like two kinds of oysters for Virginica that we plant. There's diploid, two alleles, two parents, male and female. So that's a diploid oyster that will reproduce, and a triploid oyster, three alleles, they don't reproduce. So to acquire seed, most of the hatcheries are on the Gulf. We can only get triploid oysters from the Gulf, not diploids, because they're worried about different genetics in the water if they reproduce, which makes sense. Different water bodies. But triploid oysters and diploid oysters cannot go from the Atlantic to the Gulf because they're worried about diseases
Oh,
going to the Gulf. Sorry. And genetics. So,
hmm.
but what would be nice to get looked at and changed is, uh, well, if triploid oysters aren't supposed to reproduce, and it's small seed or even oyster larvae that's not even a month old, that's maybe even only a few weeks old, gets tested for pathology, genetics, for an import permit, why can't larvae, triploid larvae, so the oysters don't reproduce, go to the Gulf? So hatchery or nursery could set them and provide seed for that region.
Right.
Because they're getting tested for pathogens and diseases, and they're not that old. So and it's in a self-contained system in a hatchery, so you're not using the ambient water or the environment. Um, that's it's a struggle to get seed. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm just gonna say it's June. It's halfway through the year, and we haven't planted a crop yet for 2024.
Wow.
And so there's a lot of things, and that's a struggle. And it takes time. I mean, it could be a full-time job for a handful of people to just lobby to get regulations, research, hard data to back up and change some of these regulations, or prove, hey, this in that example of, sending triplet oyster seed for larvae to the Gulf, hey, this popped up, so we're not going to do it. But then there's hard data. Then it should be revisited again, later on, because then there might be disease resistant strains. But farmer needs seed to plant to have a crop.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And I looked at your
So
website too. You have a lot of amazing and very high quality restaurants and resorts and places that you're in, because you're producing such a quality product that, yeah, we need those like planted.
yeah,
For
yeah, and
sure.
it's that all that like mindset. I mean,
Mm.
years ago, like in the United States, nobody ate sushi, nobody ate raw fish. That's a staple. Even like, not a sushi restaurant, a seafood restaurant, even their appetizers, will have like raw salmon or tuna, and it's
Mhm.
a part of our food culture now. But that education, that narrative based upon fact, as far as eating southern oysters. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, it's really interesting too. Like during season in Florida, when somebody gets sick from eating an oyster, our sales go down. And if you look back at it, actually, at least within the last 10 years, if not more, cases of people getting sick from eating oysters, the oysters were not from Florida. They were consumed in Florida, but were chased back to a farm or wild harvest area out of state.
Interesting.
And most of the time, it's not the actual oyster or the farm or the water body. It's mishandling in the transport or at a kitchen or at your home. You take the oysters out; they need to be on ice. You should consume them right away. Don't leave them out next to a heat lamp.
Mm.
So, or depending on like we use Coolbot for our walk-in cooler. I have an app. I get alerts, I get text messages and emails if the temperature goes up too much. Again, if the internet goes out, I get an alert, but I can't live read what the temperature is. It's just like, hey, it's offline.
Mm.
um
But it gives you an alert. That's the thing. You're using the
mhm,
technology to help keep the oysters at a healthy temperature so that, yeah, you don't run into that problem. That's very
mhm.
interesting. I didn't even realize Florida oysters had a stigma because I just like oysters in general, but it makes more sense to me with sustainable too to have it be more local. You don't
Mhm.
have to transport the same way. And you're right, the education is really important for people just handling and knowing what to do with the shellfish. So this is so enlightening, Nicolette,
Yeah.
from right from the job itself, being a farmer and in this day and age with such interesting challenges and also to technology hopefully to help or sustainable practices. It's just so
Yeah.
inspiring. And I know your time is very precious, and I appreciate you so much for taking it today. Where can people find out more? Where should they find you?
Yeah, of course. Can I back up for a minute? So I don't think
Absolutely.
I finished answering your question of anybody that kind of wants to get into this field
Oh,
and
please. Yeah, go
industry.
for it.
Um, a lot of jobs do say, hey, we prefer for you to have a college degree or a bachelor's degree. Um, I think because the trades aren't as prominent as they used to be. I think I'm hoping that narrative is kind of going to change a bit because yes, I went to college, I got my BS, it gave me a good background in the biology in aquaculture. I always thought I was going to do finfish, stock enhancement finfish. That's what I wanted to do. But I learned a lot working on different farms, working on different farms, visiting visiting farms too. I still do when I get the chance. Um, there's a farmer that reached out to me a few months ago. Him and his family were from Canada, PEI. They were in Orlando on vacation. He reached out to me. He was like, hey, email me by any chance. I'm in the area. Um, if you had time, I'd love to come out with you for a day and see uh, how your farm is, what you're doing. And we're doing very similar processes and gear type because our cages actually come from out of Gloucester, Massachusetts. So we get those cages shipped down. And we're in that wider part of the lagoon. So we're not protected because the Indian River gets wide and meanders. So we're very exposed. So we need that robust gear type out there versus like floating bags. And he was really surprised. He sent me some photos. He was surprised how similar his setup was to our farm, being, from PEI to Florida. Um, Granted, I've had experience up in New England, so might be a little biased with my knowledge that I gained um, visiting and working for other farms.
Right.
Um, but what I really took away from it was he's been having issues with the main line. So your main line or your mud line for us holds the cages, and then you have puck lines that go up and attach to the ropes or your bridles on the cage,
Okay.
and they stay on the line. And the puck lines connecting to your mud line, they keep breaking and chafing. Well, and shredding and that's what's happened. We're having that same issue about 3.5 years in. And it was interesting to talk about that. Yes, it's rope, it's boring. But that's what's holding the cages on. That's all your
It's pretty
infrastructure and your
important. Yeah.
prop in there.
It's not
And your
boring at
prop
all.
in there. Yeah. Um, and he put me in touch with the company Polysteel in Canada, and they're sending us rope, this different type of rope that might be more robust because he's having the same issue, and a
Wow.
number of farmers are having similar issues up there. So they're sending us rope to test out and see. So it'll be interesting. It was kind of like, you're calling from where?
How'd you find out about us?
So yeah, I was like, oh, so and so told me about you guys, and it was great. So I'm excited to we're gonna be the Florida guinea pigs, if you will, but
Mhm.
to try this new rope out that literally, if that farmer wasn't on vacation, randomly reached out
Wow.
to me, and
Right.
I'd still just be putting out the same rope we've been using and not changing. And then even too, he showed me, their puck lines that come off the main line, a different way instead of a single one, it'd be one rope going this way so it keeps tension instead of just one going up and down. So that's something else that we're gonna try to to help mitigate breakage. And I mean, we always want to like minimize gear usage and rope. you know um we always want things to last as long as they can so we don't have to buy more,
Yeah.
but also to minimize your carbon footprint and what's going to be recycled or reused or repurposed, or sometimes unfortunately to a landfill. So
Good point. Yeah,
but
so you're really thinking about
yeah.
this in a 360 kind of way. And I love that there's the interest amongst farmers to share and collaborate and support. And like you said, just visiting is really great. Yeah, and I got to see some of the video. I need to watch the whole thing, but I'll definitely include a link because it's so cool to see you. I just was looking at photos even of you swimming around your lagoon with the, snorkel gear next to the cages and stuff. It's really, really cool. So, Nicolette
Yeah,
Mariano, thank you
thanks.
so much for taking the time today. Treasure Coast Shellfish. You want to tell people the
Yeah,
website? I'll put a link. Go ahead.
yeah, treasurecoastshellfish.com. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok. I mainly will post to Instagram. So doing everything, a little bit
You
of
are.
everything.
You're definitely doing it, and you're
So
inspiring us in the meantime because it's Honestly, I can't tell you how many people say they want to have an impact and make a difference, and you definitely are. So, and you're doing it beautifully with great food too. I mean, it's like a win-win.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean it's different, but I feel like it's like any entrepreneur, like it's that really good times and then you hit rock bottom. And when times are good and sales are good and Mother Nature is nice, you gotta save up for I'll say usually Mother Nature will pull that rug out from underneath you or or life.
Mm,
So I
good
think
advice.
most entrepreneurs in general, it's it's gambling and it's farming. You got to try it. But definitely if you're interested in shellfish aquaculture, just aquaculture in general, look up farms. Look up farms, look up people doing stuff in your area, reach out. I mean, you might reach out a few times. Again, we're all running businesses, so I tell people like if I don't get back to you in like a day or a week, I totally like lost your email or your text
Yeah, you're like,
message or
follow
phone
up.
call.
Don't worry. Yeah, you even
Yeah,
told me.
follow
You're like,
back up. It's
yeah, don't
not,
worry. Call me. Let's
we're
make this
not
happen.
necessarily ignoring you. Just we
Right.
have a lot going on and I've had people follow back up with me like years later. Hey, we're down here again visiting. Are you doing farm tours yet? That's something we want to do. And
It would be an
as we
amazing
grow,
field
we'll
trip,
be
I can
able
tell you
to,
that.
yeah, yeah,
Inspire
actually
the
be able
next
to
generation.
offer that. Yeah,
Yeah,
have a tour boat that's also not the work boat. So
right. Oh, that's so cool.
yeah.
Wow. Nicolette, one more quick question. So do people need a degree? You mentioned that. They don't have to, or they could. It helps, but you don't have to have one?
I would say if you're going into more like research, definitely having a bachelor degree was required for like when I applied for a job and I worked at Duke University or University of Southern Mississippi, um, or even in hatcheries, because there is more technical
Mm.
work to it. But I wouldn't say that I feel like it depends on the company too. Anybody can that wants to learn and wants to put in the time can be taught something. So that very expensive piece of paper,
Yeah, right.
I
It
personally
depends on the
say
person, right? Yeah.
isn't isn't needed. I mean, there's a lot of people that went to college or went to trade school for something that they're not doing at all.
CPA over here.
So that
Yeah. You called it.
really helps you though during tax season.
It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. Exactly. It doesn't hurt. Not a bad thing to have. But I hear you. It's not necessarily a
Yeah.
requirement. Really, the knowledge is what you need,
So,
if you really want to be a farmer as well, right? So getting in on
work
farms,
for other
working on them,
companies.
visiting. Yeah. Wow. Well,
Yeah, work for other companies. You're getting paid, hopefully, or you're doing an internship and you're learning. There's nothing better than, I mean, I'm a very visual, hands-on learner in general, but like seeing it, touching it, doing it, and then, working somewhere else. Um,
yeah, taking that on.
and they using a different, as far as shellfish running, might use a different gear type, or we're not in a we're in a subtidal area, so we're using floating cages. For example, like in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, in certain areas like Barnstable Harbor, um, they'll use different and it's mucky. It's not mucky. It's like it's soft,
Mm.
and with the peat sometimes near the peat marshes. So they'll use rebar racks or different types of bottom cages because then during low tide, the oysters are going to be exposed to the air, and oysters naturally set in that intertidal area. So
Mhm.
they can be exposed during both low tides a day to knock back predators, boring sponge. We don't have that on our farm. Last year was the war on barnacles. So what we do is we flip the cages over to recreate Mother Nature to air dry. So um, I I would have never seen that if I didn't work or visit other farms, on my travels and things. When I
Mm.
can, I still do. Still
Right.
do.
There's always more
So
to learn. Yeah.
mhm.
Wow.
Connect with people like Mirror Point Oyster Company up in Maine. Dan, I called him a lot in was it 22, 23? Forget. Hurricane Ian and Nicole. They don't get hurricanes up in Maine, but they sink their cages for winter. Um, so they don't get damaged. Well, so the crop doesn't freeze from ice, and then the gear doesn't get damaged by the ice. They sink their cages, so they raise and sink them every year. We don't do that unless there's a really bad hurricane because we don't have ice. So I was, a farmer in a completely another like region. I was talking to a lot. Hey, how do you do this? I'm not sure because, it's kind of like, do you take your boat out of the water or do you prepare for certain things for a hurricane? But if it's on the water, you're not doing that like 2 days before a storm's coming. You can do that with shutters, but because then it gets really choppy, and then it's dangerous for you and the crew and stuff. So you gotta make that call ahead of time. Are we gonna leave the cages floating or sinking? And they have because a specific machine on one of their boats that helps raise and takes the water out of the floats. They do that every year. I don't. So I was asking, like, if I do have to do this, give me some pointers. What can I do? I have a davit. Or do I need to put an airline in and stuff? Because as soon as they go down after the storm, you'd want to raise them back up as soon as you can. So
wow. Nicole, you are one creative individual. I love that it's using all your faculties. I can tell you there are people who be jealous of how much you get to put into your job. It's really great. I know it's challenging, but it's really great. You're using all of it. Oh, well, thank you so much for taking the time and giving us a window into what it's like doing aquaculture farming today in this day and age as a woman